right, and all right, welcome back, everybody. In this pandemic, there are so many issues that have come to light, some of which may not have come up before. People may not have been so open to speak about. Some of which were, the mental health issues that people are facing in and outside of a pandemic. But we're speaking more so on, the current circumstances.
Well, of
Rokas.
course, and as we head back out to work, a lot of people are going back out to work with more frequency than before. And this morning, we want to talk about coping at the workplace, or working from home, or wherever you may be working from. And to help us do that, we have Micah Dell. She's a social worker and psychotherapist, social worker and psychotherapist. So, good morning, Michael. Welcome to the morning show.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right, so this morning we're talking about coping at work. I want to start by asking, how can mental health issues affect productivity in the workplace?
Well, mental health can definitely affect productivity because, if you're not okay, which it's okay not to be okay, but if you're not okay, then you can see certain signs and symptoms coming up, things like, signs and symptoms of anxiety, things like depression. And these things can definitely affect workplace morale. It affects productivity. It affects your ability to succeed.
Now tell me, as an employer, right, we're going to deal with the employers for now. How can you identify signs and symptoms of like anxiety and depression and things like that?
Well, for a lot of people, they don't really know. They may not be aware. And that's where, the things like stigma come into place and people have the fear of discussing things. But for organizations like us, Cope Counseling Services, we provide trainings. And it's good to be educated and educate yourself on signs and symptoms because sometimes, you may just believe that one of your employees is sad, or you may not know what's going on. You may just think that their productivity is low, their numbers are low, and may not be able to recognize certain signs and symptoms. But, things like persons withdrawing, things like, addictions, substance misuse, things like that are signs and symptoms. But it is good to, formally educate yourself or connect with an organization like us where we can provide that mental health 101 training where it's intensive and you can really find out what's maybe going on with your employers.
All right, so do you guys provide that service? And I'm sure that there's a cost attached, yeah? So you'll do company sessions, or you'll do, how do you normally do it?
Well, in terms of for organizations, yes, there is a cost attached. They can reach out to us and we can provide mental health 101 training for employers, for employees, so people can kind of, again, recognize those signs and symptoms, know if they're dealing with mental health issues. And on top of that, we also provide coping strategies. So we talk about that kind of workplace management, stress management, and, give strategies that people can work with in terms of moving forward from mental health issues. But we will be starting community programming soon, which will have no cost attached. And those are for individuals who, might not have access to certain resources.
Okay. And how do you guys assist employees and employers who may be experiencing some of these, mental health issues, the depression and stuff like that? What kind of assistance do you guys provide for them?
So right now we have like an intensive employment assistance program. It's not your regular fly-by-night employment assistance program where it's just, maybe one or two sessions, one-off sessions. It's a really intensive session. So as I mentioned before, we do provide that kind of mental health 101 training so persons can recognize the signs and the symptoms and know if they're dealing with something like depression or anxiety or something more serious. And then after we provide that training, we also provide group sessions. So maybe, employers or employees have something relatable that they're dealing with. And we have these group sessions. And then we also have individual sessions
Right.
where we'll work with employees on a one-to-one basis for those individuals who might need more intensive one-to-one counseling.
So, Micah, can you give us some of the just a little insight into what people can do, like on a personal level, to help with coping with things like that, with
Of
depression and
course.
anxiety?
Of course, of course. So right now, especially with the pandemic going on, we've seen so many different factors. We've seen this spike in anxiety, people who are having panic attacks. They've never experienced a panic attack before. And all of a sudden, they're calling the hospital, they're calling the ambulance because they're afraid, right? So in terms of that, we really want to start practicing mindfulness. And that is the practice of being in the here and in the now. So not really focusing on the past, not focusing on the future, but really staying in the present and being mindful. So we have exercises like mindful eating, mindful showers, and things like that. You also want to practice things that work for you, right? So, we always say in the therapy community, you want to do things like journaling. You want to do things like practicing yoga. You want to, maybe reading, cycling, exercise, things like that, whatever may work for you, aromatherapy. So you want to find something that works for you and stick to it, and ensure, again, practicing mindfulness.
All right, Marissa, we've been talking about I'm sorry, Micah. I don't know why I called you Marissa. My apologies.
That's okay.
We've been talking about mental health, but I want you to please tell the nation how important is focusing on your mental health. How important is it for both employers and employees to be, like you said just now, mindful? Because I think that we don't always live in the now, and we don't always realize that we have problems that we're dealing with. So how important is it to pay attention to your mental health?
Well, I would say that paying attention to your mental health is just as important as your physical health, right? If you find something wrong with your leg or wrong with your arm or something, you're going to go see a doctor, right? If you are experiencing signs and symptoms of anxiety, of depression, of something more severe, like maybe, bipolar disorder, personality disorder, you want to go see a professional. You want to seek some type of help. Start with talking to somebody, maybe talking to a family member, talking to a close friend. And if that doesn't help, you want to reach out to maybe a professional. You want to reach out to somebody like us at Cope Counseling Services, where you can really find that treatment. Because again, if you are mentally ill or you are not okay mentally, then you will find it difficult to, perform day-to-day activities. You'll find it difficult to be productive at work. You'll find it difficult to be productive in your everyday life. You'll see things, like your communication abilities being affected. You'll see things like your relationships being affected, right? And so we want to really pay attention, especially in Trinidad and Tobago. We have a lot of stigma tied to mental health. It's like a taboo conversation right now. And so we really want to break that stigma, and by breaking that stigma, changing lives.
Well, how do we break the stigma? How do we get people to say, all right, something is wrong and I really need to get help? How do we get to that first step? I think that step is where we have a lot of blockage happening in Trinidad and Tobago especially.
For sure. Well, I'm glad we're having this conversation because October 10th is World Mental Health Day,
okay,
right? And we have days like this. In May, we have, Mental Health Awareness Month. And it's really about starting that conversation. It's really about pushing mental health awareness. It's really about letting our society know that it's okay to not be okay, right? We don't know how anxiety and depression are actually really, really, really common, a lot more common than people think, right? And so we really just want to have that conversation. We want to push awareness. We want to push education where we're learning about, again, signs and symptoms. We're learning about mental health. So we're not thinking of it. And we also being mindful of the language that you use, right? And so, I'll share with you that, we might say things like, that madman down the road, right? We want to be mindful of that. We want to use terms like, maybe he's dealing with a mental illness or she's dealing with a mental illness. And if we see that type of stuff, we want to make recommendations. We want to refer persons. We want to help individuals who are dealing with mental illness instead of making it a stigma or, making people afraid to speak up about what they're dealing with.
All right. Well, Micah, I want to thank you very much for joining us this morning and beginning this conversation. I think it's one that we definitely will continue. And I know we could probably look forward to October 10th continuing the conversation on, mental health, World Mental Health Awareness Day. So thank you very much for being a part of the conversation, and we hope to talk to you again soon. That was Micah Dell, clinical social worker and psychotherapist at Cope Counseling Services. And I want to thank her very much for joining us and starting the discussion, or continuing rather, the discussion on mental health, because it's been a big part of this pandemic. And as we continue to go forward together, we have to help each other and help each other cope, because, y'all know, it's not easy.